Amy, thank you so much for that song. It's like while I was listening to that song, I dreamt of rain and the rain came. It truly brought me to a place where I felt like I could surrender to divine consciousness. I could be held by divine consciousness, so much so actually that it's quite emotional, because it's so beautiful. It's like that longing to be in that space where forgiveness is automatic, where the past doesn't matter anymore, because what is so present is the light and the beauty that is really the truth of our being. So thank you. I was thinking about this topic. It's like the topic for the month, held by divine consciousness. And one thing I like about being older is that I can look back at my life and I can start to see a pattern, and I can start to see my growth, and I can see the patterns of the lessons I'm supposed to learn, where in my 20s I might be like, oh my God, what's happening? And, now it's like, oh yeah, I recognize this. This is just a going deeper into this lesson. And the lesson for me has been about surrendering and not trying to control everything that is happening. But that through surrendering, through humility, which is, to me, humility is not about putting myself down. Humility is recognizing the awesomeness of the divine that is so big and so vast and so beautiful and creative that I will never comprehend that with my mind. And that's okay, because I can be held by that consciousness. But humility means that I need to let go of control. When I think about the world, it's like, it feels like energetically, it feels like crackling. It feels so jumbled. And me really like to figure things out. It's like it's like about a year ago, I was like, I'll never figure this out. It's really hard. It seems like so complicated to unpack this, but that is not really my work right now. I had something like, it's like I can't trust necessarily the information I'm getting from the outside, because there are so many lies and it is so sophisticated at times. So I have to go inside. I have to do the practices. I have to stay in the light, and then I will get clarity. And I know that has been my life lesson, is actually to trust my body before I trust my mind. Because my mind can make up all kinds of stuff, but my body is very clear about what is so. But I need to be humble to get there. I think in New Thought, humility wasn't necessarily popular. And which makes sense, because New Thought, the father of New Thought, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who lived in the 19th century, lived during that time where people were not empowered. The clergy and the medical profession had the power. If somebody would get sick, the clergy would tell them it was because they had sinned. The medical profession usually couldn't help them. And then Phineas Quimby, who was a mesmerist, sorry, I'm just losing the word. What is the word for mesmerist? Hypnotism. There we go. Thank you. Mesmerize. Yeah, it is. It's like, so, he would hypnotize people, and what he noticed is like when they changed their beliefs, their bodies could heal, at least for many. And so that became really empowering, right? That brought the power back to the people. They started to recognize the power that was within themselves or is within us. So the beginning of New Thought was really about mind healing and self-empowerment. Makes total sense, but there is more to it. And one of the things I've really liked in New Thought is that there is a concept of the 4 stages or the 4 kingdoms of consciousness. And it's like a development we might go through in our consciousness. I think it's presented in quite a simple way, but easy to recognize in our own lives. And so the first stage would be, it's done to me. So it's victimhood. You know, it's done to me. And you have to realize that none of the stages are bad or wrong, and one, but as we go up stages, the prior stages are always there, because it is, you know, it's almost like we're looking at life from different realities, and all the realities exist on some level, right? So it's done to me. We can think about, you know, when major nature happenings occur, like earthquakes, you know, it feels like it's done to me, right? So there is some validity to that. And then, you know, when we come out of that victim consciousness, we go into the second stage where it's done by me. And that is, you know, there's a lot of emphasis on that in New Thought. It's like through affirmations, you know, we create our world. If we want to heal, we change our mind. Right? But that can become really exhausting. Because if we want to manage everything in our lives, you know, at a certain point, at least in my experience, it became overwhelming. And then there is a surrender, and we go through the third stage, which is like it's done through me. So it's divine consciousness that is working through me. And then we talk about, like, it's not so much necessarily about coming from the mind and making up our own minds what we want, as really tuning in as to what is arising or what wants to express through us and following that, which requires a lot more trust, right? For me, I definitely had to go through the second stage before I could be in the third one. Before I could be in the third one. And it's not like once you're in the third one, you're never in the first or the second one. It's like that process continues to happen. Right? And then there is the fourth stage, and that is, it is done as me. And that is really knowing that divine is expressing as us. So it's not like a losing of individuality. It's like really identifying with the divine that is everywhere. Now, in the Western world, we really like to master things. And I imagine for a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, let me get to stage 4 as soon as I can. You know, it's like a badge of honor, or I would say even as a long-term practitioner or as a minister, it's like I should be in stage 4. And what I want to say is, like, I think we have to be really careful, because stage 4, this process is not about mastery. It's about being present and being present with life. I was reading a book about an enlightened master, and he described his experience of stage 4. And he said, you know, one point I might be an individual, or I can feel where I am right here, and then all of a sudden I merge with divine consciousness, and it's pure bliss, and I don't exist anymore. And then I come back again, and here I am. There was no attachment. It's like that easy flow from one to another. You know, that person didn't have to prove that he was enlightened. He didn't have to declare he was enlightened. Because I think, I can say I'm there, but I think it's like once you're in that place, there's nothing to prove, because you prove it to whom? If we're all divine consciousness, who am I proving to that I am doing so well? So I'm saying this because I don't want you to cut yourself short. You know, because that's where humility comes in again. If I say that I'm already there, I'm already in stage 4, I got a mate, then my mind is closed. Right? Then there are no greater possibilities, no greater experiences. And if we're not there, we're really stepping into proving that we're there. So again, it just closes us off to greater experiences, and it doesn't make life easier. The same person said, it's like, somebody asked him, it's like, how do you know that you're enlightened? And he says, when you're thirsty and you drink water, how do you know that you drank enough? And I love that, because it's really hard to describe what that process is, right? But you just know. Oh, I'm not thirsty anymore. Here I am. So when we go to, when we move from stage 2, it's like it's done by me to it is done through me. It's such a beautiful process. I was saying before, it's like I can't figure out, with my mind, I can't figure out anymore what is happening in the world necessarily. I mean, I can describe what's happening in the world, but I cannot give it to you in a linear fashion. I have to stay in the eye of the hurricane. I have to stay in that light. And there might be lots going on around me, but I have to stay in that light as much as I can. That are my practices. And that is, again, where humility comes in. That force of the hurricane can be so dramatic. But knowing that the light is at least as powerful. And if I stay there, then it will spread. The 12 steps of the 12-step program, I really like them, and I especially like the first 3. Because it has really helped me in my journey. And I think it describes really the movement from stage 2 to stage 3. And step 1 is we admitted we were powerless and that our lives had become unmanageable. That can be a tough one for new thought, right? That promotes that we have control over our lives. But I want to illustrate this step 1 with a poem by St. John of the Cross, who talks about arrogance. And I think arrogance shows up in many ways, right? We can say it's like when we have to feel better than, or when we feel like we have to, we have it together. So this is what St. John of the Cross says. The weight of arrogance is such that no bird can fly carrying it. The weight of arrogance is such that no bird can fly carrying it. And the man who feels superior to others, that man cannot dance. The real dance, when the soul takes God into its arms and you both fall onto your knees in gratitude, a blessed gratitude for life. The weight of arrogance is such that no bird can fly carrying it. And a man who feels superior to others, that man cannot dance the real dance when the soul takes God into its arms and you both fall onto your knees in gratitude. A blessed gratitude for life. So the first 3 steps of the 12 steps, it's like we admitted we were powerless and that our lives had become unmanageable. That is honesty. It's like my life feels overwhelming. I can't keep control over it. And then we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I love that. At the time, for sure, I loved the idea of being restored to sanity. And it's like that moment when we recognize that there is something greater than me. And yes, that something greater is expressing as me and through me. And there is so much more to it than what I'm experiencing right this moment. That is when the soul takes God into its arms. And it says, step 3 is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. As we understood God. For me, the universe, I couldn't relate to God as the word God. You know, I had too many images with that. So for me, it was the universe. For people, it's nature. For others, it's the ocean, you know. For me right now, it's divine consciousness. I mean, the word God doesn't have the static that it used to have. You know, but can we surrender to that power that is bigger than us? You know, when I was looking back again in my life, it's like that first step is like admitting that we're powerless. It's like being honest. I was thinking about 2 experiences I had in my life, and it's like years ago I took Tai Chi, and I actually really liked Tai Chi. But at that point, I was still in the frame of mind that if my teacher told me once what I should do, then I should do it perfectly. It's amazing when I look at it now, you know, how wrapped up I was in that. And so I would be in class. And Tai Chi, you know, it's a lifelong learning experience, right? So it's ridiculous when I think about it now, but that was so in my consciousness. So when the teacher was a very kind teacher, when she would come over to me to, you know, adjust me, I would totally contract. And because I contracted, I couldn't learn. I couldn't get at what she was saying because I was so wrapped up in not looking good, in my opinion. Not in her opinion, it was just my opinion. Right? So I was really closed off. And I think we have to be aware of that in the Western world, like I said before. I think that mastery is so in our culture. You know, we need to become experts. We need to be good at something. It's like the lifelong learning. Yeah, of course, it's like in the circles that we move, lifelong learning is definitely promoted. But I think in society it's not necessarily like that. You know, so you have to realize that when we move around in the world, we pick some of that up. You know, when you, as a fish, you swim in water, you get wet. Nothing you can do about it besides being aware of it. Now, my other experience I had was actually more the opposite. It's like when I first came to the States, my English was really bad. It was my least favorite subject in school when I grew up in the Netherlands. I almost flunked it. And then I came to the States. And my Dutch didn't work really well here. You know, but I came to a point where I had something like, I have to put my pride aside because I want to learn. In order to function here, I have to put my pride aside. And I decided that when I was in conversation with somebody, if there was a word I didn't know, I would ask them how to spell it and what it meant. And it was a great way to learn for me, besides other things. You know, I did other things too, but it was really to not have to show up in a way that wasn't me yet. You know, so that humility, that being humble without putting myself down, I mean, that is, again, that's not being humble. Without, you know, with knowing that there was more to learn, I could be open. And it served me really well. So we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. We dance the real dance when the soul takes God into its arms and you both fall onto your knees in gratitude. I love that line. It's like we take God into our arms. We embrace that greater power that shows up for us, but we both fall, right, in gratitude. The divine is expressing as us, so it's not like a God in the sky that's going to punish us for something. It just rejoices when basically it recognizes itself. And it goes like, oh yes, they got it. Or this part of me that is expressing got it. It made this journey back to its origin. How beautiful. You know, when we embrace God, it's like a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Paul and Thecla, you know, and for them, it was the story of Paul and Thecla who really went through big transformations. And they had to listen in that moment. They had to surrender. I think when really big transformations happen, we don't necessarily know what's on the other end. We might have read about it, but it's different than when we have the experience in our bodies and actually go through the transformation. And with that, I was thinking about a little chick and its egg. And you're like, there it's growing in its egg, and it's time to get out. It's never seen the world. Has no idea what is outside that little eggshell, right? It's given the tools to get out. It has a special egg tooth. It's amazing. That disappears later, but it has a special egg tooth. And so it starts what they call pipping at the shell till it breaks. And then sometimes what they do is zipping. I love these words. Zipping, they go all around the shell till it's open. And there they are in the world. So when we are humble and we rest in the divine, doesn't mean that we don't have to do our work. We have the skills to move around in the world. We have the skills to do what we need to do. We need to listen to what's inside. And then we need to use our egg tooth and start pipping, to break out of our egg shell. And come into the world. Sometimes, when we're held by the divine, it might not feel so good. I was thinking about the goddess Kali in Hinduism. So, what I love, and Hinduism isn't the only religion who has that, but that's the one I can relate to most, is that, in Hinduism they have so many gods and goddesses, which really represent the qualities of the divine. Right? Hinduism believes that the belief is that there's only one divine consciousness. So the gods and goddesses are expressions of the divine qualities. So we have beautiful goddesses like the goddess Lakshmi of abundance, and she's beautiful, and she's gorgeous, and love looking at her and identifying with her. And then we have Kali, who is a ferocious goddess. And she has a necklace of skulls. And she has a big sword. And she can be very scary looking. But it's still an expression of God. It's still an expression of the divine. But what Kali does, Kali is not a mean goddess. Kali is not out to hurt us. But as I say, Kali doesn't put up with any BS. Kali. And it's like, so the divine always wants us to, grow and expand so that we know our true nature. And Kali literally goes like, this is not serving you whatsoever, let me cut it away. And in our reality, that can feel really painful. I have had that things fall away and I'm like, whoa. It's almost like feeling disoriented. And then, I go through the process and go like, I am so happy that fell away because I am so much more stable within myself because of it. So that is Kali. So when things get hard, it's not necessarily that something went wrong. When we're held by the divine, it can be that some things just need to be cut away. And sometimes that's a long process. Sometimes they're little chips, over time. Sometimes it's a big chunk, at least in my experience. But when we can relax, and when we keep going back to that light that we are, and when we keep going back to the truth of who we are, in whatever form supports you, for me, I can do a mantra that really supports me and I can rest in it and I feel the trust when I'm there. And we each have our own way, to get to that place where we can rest and go back there. I want to go back to that song, when I dreamt of rain and the rain came, and that experience I have is like once we're really in that light, everything else falls away. That troubled us so much, and we can see the truth of what is going on. So I had been thinking clearly about this topic and working with it, and then yesterday I was in a dance workshop, and we did an exercise. There are many forms of this exercise, but we did it in this class with a partner, and it's a trust exercise. And so there was another person next to me, and we took turns closing our eyes, and then the other person had to lead the person who closed their eyes and dance throughout the studio. And there were other people dancing throughout the studio, and there were walls, and But the job of, when I had my eyes closed, the job of my partner was to take me and keep me safe. It was very fun. And I really trusted her. It's like I knew her. I knew she wouldn't let me run into a wall. And so I could really move with a lot of freedom. And then what we were instructed to do is that the person who had their eyes closed, they needed to move by themselves. So first we were guided, but then I needed to follow my impulse, but my partner's job was to keep me safe. So I started doing that, which was also great fun. And when I was thinking about it, it's like, yeah, that is like resting in the divine. First of all, I had to listen to her. If she kept me from the wall, but I would ignore her guidance, I would run into the wall. So my part was listening or feeling what she was trying to communicate to me. We weren't speaking, by the way, so it was just like nudging. And then it was also, it's like, yeah, I can follow my own impulses. And then there's still the divine who tells me at times like, no, if you're going that way, you're going to run into the wall or you're going to run into another person. So, go a different way. So it was such a beautiful exercise and a surrendering and being open to being guided. And I thought, like, so perfect, for today. It's like, can we rest in the divine? But we have to listen. We have to be willing to be guided. We have to let go of our arrogance of knowing it all or looking good or any of that gets in the way. Our journey is really to drop all of that. And just to listen very carefully and then move forward. Thank you.